Welcome to Golden Ancient Tales, the place where history breathes, legends come alive, and the forgotten stories of the past sail once more. Today, we dive deep into the turquoise waters of the Caribbean to uncover a tale of treasure, betrayal, and adventure, a story of real pirates who ruled the seas during the Golden Age of Piracy. Before we begin this thrilling journey, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment below. Tell us what you think of these brave, or perhaps ruthless, treasure hunters of the Caribbean. Now, raise the sails, my friends. Let's begin. The year was 1697, a time when the Caribbean gleamed like a gem in the crown of the New World. Sunlight spilled across endless turquoise waters, and white sails dotted the horizon like floating clouds. Beneath the calm surface, however, the sea hid countless secrets, sunken ships, lost fortunes, and the bones of men who had gambled everything for gold. In the bustling pirate haven of Nassau, the scent of salt and rum mingled in the air. Tavern doors swung open to the sound of laughter, the clatter of dice, and the crackling music of fiddles. Sailors from every corner of the world filled the streets. Spaniards, Englishmen, freed Africans, and native islanders, all bound by a single dream, treasure. Among them was Elias Crow, a tall, lean sailor of barely 25, his sun-browned face shadowed by years of hardship and hope. He had worked aboard merchant ships since he was a boy, hauling sugar, rum, and spices from island to island. But Elias was different from the others. While they saw only trade, he saw freedom. The sea, to him, was not a prison of labor but a realm of promise, whispering of adventures beyond imagination. On this particular night, the tavern known as the Salty Siren was alive with chaos. Men argued over gambling debts. Tankards clinked, and sea shanties filled the smoky air. Elias sat alone at a corner table, watching as an old, half-drunk sailor muttered to anyone who would listen. The man's name was Old Briggs, though most called him Red-Eye Briggs with a scarlet tint that never left his eyes, a result of too much rum and too many sleepless nights. His voice was rough, like gravel soaked in seawater. "I tell ye, I seen it with me own eyes." Briggs roared, slamming his tankard on the table. The map of the lost crown treasure, buried deep in the Tortuga Islands, guarded by the spirits of the damned. The crowd laughed, calling him a liar and a fool. But Elias didn't. Something in the old man's tone struck him, not madness, but conviction. When the laughter died down and Briggs stumbled toward the door, Elias quietly followed him into the moonlit alley. "Old man," he said softly, "tell me more about this map of yours." Briggs squinted, suspicious. "And what's it to ye, lad?" "I'm a sailor," Elias replied, "but I've no taste for cargo or merchant's gold. I want to find my own fortune, to make my own legend. If this map is real, I'll pay you for a glimpse of it." Briggs chuckled darkly. "Gold won't buy this map, boy. It's cursed. Every man who's hunted that treasure's met his doom." "Maybe they weren't meant to find it," Elias said. "Maybe I am." The old pirate stared at him for a long moment, then grinned, revealing a mouthful of crooked teeth. Evie got the eyes of a fool and the heart of a pirate. "Meet me at dawn, behind the old shipyard. Bring no one." And just like that, the spark of destiny was lit. The next morning, Nassau woke under a brilliant sunrise. The harbor was alive. Gulls cried overhead, and waves lapped gently against wooden hulls. Elias made his way to the shipyard, where broken masts and half-rotted boats stood like skeletons from another age. Briggs was already there, sitting on a crate, clutching a rolled piece of parchment tied with black string. "This," Briggs rasped, "is the last map made by Captain Henry Avery himself, the greatest pirate to ever live. He plundered the Ganges-Sawai, the Mogul treasure ship of India, and vanished with riches beyond belief. Some say he died a king. Others say he hid his treasure here, in the Caribbean, far from the reach of crown or empire." He unrolled the parchment, revealing faint ink lines and symbols written in an old seafarer's hand. The map showed the Tortuga Islands, marked with an X, and the words, "Where the crown sleeps." Elias stared at it, his heart pounding. This was no drunken fairy tale. It was a clue to something real. "I want it," he said. "What's your price?" Briggs smiled thinly. "Not gold. There's a golden compass in the governor's mansion, stolen from me years ago. Bring it back, and the map is yours. Without it, you'll never read Avery's code. That compass unlocks the true path. Elias hesitated. Breaking into the governor's mansion meant certain death if caught, but the promise of treasure and destiny burned hotter than fear. He nodded slowly. I'll get your compass. That night, Elias gathered a small crew of friends, each as desperate and daring as he was. There was Lucia Drake, a fiery-haired navigator from Kingston who could read the stars better than any man alive. Old Finn, a weathered sailor with one eye and a heart of gold. And Captain Vane, a disgraced privateer who once served the British Navy before turning rogue. When Elias told them of the map and the compass, they didn't question his sanity, only the size of the reward. Lucia smirked. So we're thieves now? No, Elias said, his eyes gleaming. We're treasure hunters. Old Finn laughed. Ain't much difference, lad. Still they agreed, together. They crept through the sleeping streets of Nassau under a sliver of moonlight, the sound of the waves their only witness. The governor's mansion loomed ahead, white stone, iron gates, and guards stationed like statues. Lucia studied the lock and whispered, "Give me a moment." Within seconds, she slipped a thin metal pin into the keyhole. A soft click echoed, and the gate opened. Inside, they moved like shadows, careful not to wake the household. They passed through grand halls adorned with paintings and gold chandeliers until they reached the study. There, on a velvet pedestal, lay a golden compass, unlike any they had seen. Its needle spun in slow circles, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Elias reached out and took it, feeling a strange warm pulse through his palm. But as they turned to leave, the sound of boots echoed down the corridor. Guards, run. Elias hissed. They sprinted through the mansion, dodging musket fire as bullets shattered windows. Lucia kicked open a side door, and they burst into the night, racing toward the docks. As they reached the pier, Captain Vane cut the rope of a small ship tied nearby, the Serpent's wake. They leapt aboard, sails unfurling as musket balls splashed into the water around them. The wind caught their sails, and the ship surged forward into the open sea. Behind them, Nassau's lights grew smaller and smaller until they vanished into the night. Lucia turned to Elias, breathless and laughing. "You're insane." Elias grinned, holding up the glowing compass. "Maybe, but now we got the key to a legend." The stars shimmered above them. The sea stretched endlessly ahead, and in that moment, Elias Crow knew his life would never be the same again. For better or worse, he had answered the call of the sea. The sun had barely risen over the horizon when Elias Crow and his ragtag crew anchored the Serpent's wake off the coast of Nassau. The sea shimmered gold, the kind of morning that made men believe in second chances. But for Elias, there was no turning back. He stood at the bow, his eyes fixed on the mysterious golden compass in his hand. Its needle spun endlessly, never pointing north, as if searching for something lost time. Sometimes it pulsed with a faint glow, like a living heart trapped within glass. Lucia Drake leaned beside him, her red hair whipping in the wind. "Strange thing, isn't it?" she murmured. "It doesn't tell direction, it listens." Elias turned it slowly. "Briggs says the key to decoding Avery's map. But I wonder, what if it's more than that?" Lucia smirked. "A cursed trinket, more like. You saw how it lit up when you touched it. That's not nature, it's something else. Curse or not," Elias said, slipping into his coat, "it's our ticket to the treasure." Behind them, the crew worked in silence. Old Finn patched a torn sail with steady hands. Captain Vane, tall and broad-shouldered, sharpened his cutlass, the rhythmic scrape echoing across the deck. They had stolen from the governor of Nassau. That made them outlaws now, not just sailors, but pirates. And though the sea was wide and free, every pirate knew that once you cross a line, the world would come hunting. That afternoon, they met again with Red-Eye Briggs, deep in the back room of the Salty Siren. The tavern was quieter now, its usual drunken laughter replaced by whispered rumors of the break-in. Briggs had slumped in his chair, eyes gleaming like wet coals as he saw the compass in Elias's hand. "So the fool boy actually did it," he wheezed, grinning through rotting teeth. "You stole from the governor himself. Brave or stupid, I can't tell which." Elias tossed the compass on the table. Your compass, as promised. Now the map. Briggs' hands trembled as he unrolled a fresh sheet of aged parchment. The edges were burned, and a faint red stain marked one corner, as if sealed with blood. "This," he whispered, "is Captain Avery's final chart. He drew it after his betrayal." "Betrayal?" Lucia asked. Briggs nodded slowly. They say Avery murdered his own crew after plundering the Mogul treasure. But before they died, one of his men, Iron Tom, escaped with part of the map. The rest, Avery kept hidden. The two halves were said to reunite only when blood was spilled upon the parchment. Old Finn crossed himself. "That's madness." Briggs' grin widened. "Madness? Maybe, but the mark ye see there," he tapped the dark red corner of the map. "That ain't ink, my friend. That's Iron Tom's blood." The room fell silent. Even the tavern outside seemed to hold its breath. Elias leaned in, studying the faded lines. The map showed a string of islands, the Tortuga cluster, and a strange symbol, a crown split in two, one half drawn in black, the other in red. Next to it, cryptic words were scrawled in Latin: Regnum sub mare, sanguis apria viam. Lucia translated softly, her voice steady. "The kingdom beneath the sea. Blood shall open the way." Briggs' eyes glinted. "Now ye see why it's called the Map of Blood. Without it, and without the compass, ye'll never find the treasure." Elias folded the parchment carefully and slipped it into a leather tube. "Then our course is set." But before he could leave, Briggs slammed a hand on the table. "One more thing, lad. Beware the name Blackthorn." Elias turned sharply. "Who is he?" "The devil himself in a captain's coat," Briggs rasped. "He hunts treasure hunters. A man who believes he's the heir to Avery's legacy. If he hears ye carry that map, he'll gut ye before ye reach Tortuga." The warning settled in the air like smoke. That night, as the Serpent's wake sailed out of Nassau under cover darkness, the crew gathered around the deck lantern. The warm light flickered across their faces, painting them like characters from an old legend. Elias spread the map on a barrel, weighing it down with a dagger. "According to this, we head east, past Hispaniola, toward the Tortuga cluster. But there's something else. Look here." He pointed to a tiny inscription near the bottom corner, barely visible in the flickering light. It wasn't Latin this time, but Old English, rough and desperate. "The crown is not gold alone." Lucia frowned. "Meaning?" Elias shook his head. "Not sure, but it's something Avery wanted to hide. Whatever this treasure is, it's not just gold." Captain Vane crossed his arms. "If it's cursed treasure, we should throw that map into the sea and forget it ever existed." Elias met his gaze firmly. "If you want to turn back, do it now. But I'm going, with or without you." There was silence. Then old Finn chuckled, a low rumble that broke the tension. "I've spent 50 years swabbing decks for men richer than kings. If this mad chase gives me one gold coin to call my own before I die, I'll follow." Lucia smiled. "You're a fool, Elias, but a charming one. Count me in." Even Vane, though grim-faced, gave a short nod. "Fine, but when the sea takes us, I'll haunt you myself." Elias grinned faintly. "Then we're agreed." He took the golden compass, placed it on the map, and whispered, "Show us the way." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the needle began to move, turning east, then pausing over the edge of the map, right where the words "Isle of Bones" were scribbled faintly. "The compass listens," Lucia murmured again, almost in awe. And so they sailed east. 3 days passed. The sea turned rougher, the wind sharper. The Serpent's wake danced over black waves beneath brooding clouds. Each night, the crew heard strange noises, the groaning of timbers, the whisper of voices that weren't their own. On the 4th night, as lightning flashed across the sky, Elias was woken by a sound below deck, a faint, rhythmic tapping. He grabbed a lantern and descended the narrow stairs. The hold smelled of salt and damp wood. The map lay on the table, still secured by his dagger. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was coming from the map itself. Elias leaned closer. For a brief second, He thought he saw something moving beneath the parchment, like the faint pulse of veins under skin. He blinked. The markings shimmered, rearranging ever so slightly. Suddenly, a shadow loomed behind him. Can't sleep either? It was Lucia. She looked at the map, eyes wide. It's changing. Before they could speak, the lantern flickered, and a drop of rain, or was it something else, fell from the ceiling onto the map. The parchment reacted instantly. The red stains deepened, spreading like veins. The island symbols shifted into new positions, revealing a new marking, an X at the edge of the Tortuga cluster, labeled simply, "The Crown's Tomb." Lucia gasped, "It's alive." Elias exhaled slowly. "No, it's blood. It remembers blood." Thunder cracked above, shaking the ship. He rolled up the map and tucked it safely away. When he returned to deck, the crew was gathered, staring into the storm. Lightning illuminated a dark shape on the horizon, a massive ship, its black sails torn but powerful, cutting through the waves like a predator. Old Finn squinted. "By the devil, that's the Revenant." Captain Vane's jaw tightened. Blackthorn's ship. The storm howled around them, and Elias felt the first sting of real fear. The chase had begun. The storm that night tore through the Caribbean like an angry god. Waves rose like mountains, crashing against the Serpent's wake with bone-shattering force. The crew fought desperately, hauling ropes and cutting sails to keep the ship from breaking apart. Elias Crow stood at the wheel, rain blinding his eyes, the sea raging beneath his boots. Lightning split the sky, revealing a monstrous shadow on the horizon. Another ship, larger, darker, cutting through the chaos with unnatural speed. Lucia Drake shouted over wind, "It's the Revenant! She's gaining on us." Elias gritted his teeth. "Hold steady. Keep her nose into the wind." The Revenant was a ship of nightmares, its sails blackened by tar and smoke, its figurehead carved into the shape of a weeping angel. She belonged to Captain Silas Blackthorn, the most feared pirate of the Caribbean. Story said he'd sold his soul for power, that his ship could track any man who dared chase Avery's gold. As lightning flashed again, Elias saw her flag rise, a skull crown in iron. "Load the cannons." Captain Vane barked. "If they want us, they'll pay in blood." But the storm was no ally. The sea clawed at the decks, swallowing men whole. The cannons were soaked, useless in the raging downpour. The Serpent's wake groaned as a mast snapped in half, crashing into the sea. "Cut it loose." Elias roared, "Or she'll drag us down." Old Finn and two sailors hacked at the ropes, sending the splintered mast tumbling away. The ship lurched violently but stayed afloat. When dawn finally came, the storm had passed, but the Revenant was gone. The horizon was empty, the sea calm as glass, as though the night before had been nothing but a nightmare. Lucia leaned against the railing, breathless. "We lost her." Elias nodded, though he wasn't convinced. For now, the crew spent the day repairing the battered ship. Torn sails were patched, the deck scrubbed of seawater and blood. They were bruised, exhausted, but alive. Captain Vane approached Elias, his face grim. "We can't keep sailing in this condition. The nearest safe harbor is Hispaniola. We make port there, gather supplies, and refit. Then we continue." Elias agreed reluctantly. He knew Vane was right, but in his mind, the Revenant still haunted him. The way it had moved through the storm like a predator, always just beyond the lightning's reach. That night, as the crew rested, Elias sat alone in his cabin. The golden compass lay on the table beside the map of blood, both faintly glowing under the lantern light. He opened the map again. The blood stains seemed to shift like smoke, forming faint outlines of skulls and waves. The words "The Crown's Tomb" flickered at the edge, as if alive. Lucia entered quietly, holding 2 mugs of rum. "Can't sleep either?" Elias shook his head. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that ship." "Blackthorn." He nodded. "Briggs warned me. Said the man hunts treasure hunters." Lucia sat opposite him. "You think he's after the map?" "He's after whatever Avery left behind. If the legends are true, Avery's treasure isn't just gold. It's something greater. Something men would kill for." Lucia smirked faintly. "Men already are." They drank in silence, the sound of the waves lapping softly against the hull. Then Elias spoke, his voice low. "I've made a decision. When we reach Hispaniola, we'll rename the ship." Lucia raised an eyebrow. "Rename her? Why?" He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Because the old name belongs to a man I used to be, a sailor chasing dreams. But after Nassau, after the mansion, after the Revenant, we're not just sailors anymore." Lucia studied him for a moment, then smiled. "And what shall we call her?" "The Black Serpent." Lucia's grin widened. "Fitting. She's fast, unpredictable, and deadly when cornered." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of destiny settle over him. Then it settled. From this night forward, the Serpent's wake is dead. Long live the Black Serpent. At dawn, they reached the shores of Hispaniola, a bustling French settlement teeming with traders, mercenaries, and drifters. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the scent of roasted meat and spice filled the humid air. As they docked, Elias gave strict orders. "No talk of the map. No talk of the compass. We're merchants from Port Royal, nothing more." The crew nodded, disappearing into the crowd to gather supplies. Elias and Lucia made their way to a quiet tavern by the water, its walls covered with ship wheels, rusted anchors, and faded maps. They sat near the window, keeping their voices low. "We need more men," Lucia whispered. "The storm took half our crew." "I know," Elias said, "but they need to be loyal, not thieves or drunks." As if summoned by fate, a shadow fell across their table. A tall man stood there, barefoot, dark-skinned, his face weathered by the sun. A scar ran from his jaw to his collarbone. "I hear you're hiring," he said in a deep Caribbean accent. Elias studied him. "Who told you that?" The man smiled faintly. "Word travels fast when gold is involved. Name's Jonas Marlowe. Used to sail with Blackbeard." Lucia raised a brow. "Used to?" "He got too mad for my liking. I left before the Navy burned his ship." Elias leaned forward. "And why would a man like you want to sail with us?" Jonah's gaze was steady. "Because you're chasing something big. I can smell it. And when men start whispering about the Revenant, I know treasure ain't far behind." Elias hesitated, then extended his hand. "Welcome aboard, Marlowe." Jonas clasped it firmly. "Aye, Captain." That night, as the crew returned with supplies and new recruits, a messenger stumbled into the tavern, his clothes soaked, his face pale. "Captain Crow," he gasped, looking around. "Message for you." Elias took the folded parchment. It was sealed with a black wax crest, a crown made of thorns. He broke it open. Inside, in elegant handwriting, were just 3 words. "I found you." Elias froze. Lucia leaned over his shoulder, reading the note, her face drained of color. Blackthorn. Before Elias could respond, a cannon blast thundered across the harbor. The windows shattered, and the tavern shook. Through the broken glass, they saw fire erupt from the docks. Ships burning, sailors screaming. And through the smoke, the unmistakable outline of the Revenant appeared, its black sails glowing red from the reflection of the flames. Elias drew his pistol. To the ship. Now! The crew sprinted through chaos, dodging falling masts and exploding barrels. The harbor was a scene of pure hell. Blackthorn's men stormed the docks, firing muskets and dragging prisoners. Elias reached the Black Serpent just as the gangplank caught fire. He jumped aboard, shouting orders. "Raise the anchor." Lucia, take the wheel. Marlowe, man the aft guns. Cannonballs whistled past, splintering the dock. The Serpent roared to life, sails snapping as she pushed off from shore. Behind them, the Revenant pursued, its black hull cutting through flame and smoke. Lucia shouted, "She's faster than us." "Then we'll be smarter." Elias shouted back, "Head toward the reefs." "The reefs? We'll tear the hull apart." "Trust me." Lucia turned the wheel sharply. The Serpent darted toward the jagged rocks, waves crashing violently around them. The Revenant followed close behind. At the last moment, Elias shouted, "Now!" Lucia swung the ship hard to port. The Serpent slid narrowly between 2 rocks. Behind them, The Revenant tried to follow, but its massive hull scraped the reef, shattering wood and sending debris flying. Cheers erupted from the crew, but Elias didn't smile. He knew this wasn't over. As the black serpent disappeared into the mist, he looked back one last time. The Revenant was still afloat, damaged, but alive. And on its burning deck, silhouetted against the flames, Captain Blackthorn stood perfectly still, staring after them. Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine. He whispered, "Let him come. The black serpent will be ready." And so, under a blood-red dawn, the pirate Elias Crow was truly born. No longer a dreamer chasing gold, but hunted captain of legend, bound by destiny to face the terror of the seas. The wind howled like a spirit lost at sea as the sea serpent cut through the dark waters of the Caribbean. The crew huddled on deck, their eyes fixed on the table where Captain Drake carefully unrolled the parchment they had risked their lives to retrieve. The map, rumored to belong to the infamous pirate Henry Morgan, shimmered faintly under the lantern light, its ink not quite black, not quite red, but something eerily in between. Drake's hands trembled slightly as he studied the ancient script. "Look at this," he murmured, tracing his finger along the drawn coastlines. "This isn't just a map, it's a cipher. There are markings here that don't belong to any known coordinates." Beside him, Isabella leaned in, her sharp eyes scanning the cryptic runes etched along the edges. "That's not Spanish or English," she said softly. "It's older. Could be Mayan or something even before that." The air grew tense as the ship rocked gently. The crew had gathered in silence, drawn by the strange energy that seemed to radiate from the map itself. Suddenly, the lantern flickered. The light dimmed, then blazed again, casting distorted shadows across the deck. Miguel, the ship's youngest hand, stepped back nervously. "Captain, maybe we shouldn't be touching that thing," he said. "I've heard tales about cursed treasure maps. Men who followed them never came back." Drake glanced up, his sea-weathered face stern but calm. "Every treasure worth finding has a curse attached to it, lad," he said. "But we didn't come this far to turn back now." A low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance. The ocean, moments ago calm, began to churn. Isabella frowned, watching the horizon. "That storm came out of nowhere," she whispered, almost as if the sea itself doesn't want us to find what's hidden. The captain didn't answer. Instead, he looked closer at a strange marking, a blood-red X encircled by a serpent biting its own tail. "The Isle of Shadows," he read aloud. "That's where it leads." Black Jack laughed, a deep, uneasy sound. "Isle of Shadows? I've heard of that place. Sailors say it's cursed. Ships that go there vanish, swallowed by the fog. No one ever comes back." Drake rolled up the map carefully and placed it into a metal case. "Then it sounds like we're heading in the right direction." That night, the storm struck. Waves crashed against the sea serpent with a fury that seemed unnatural. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the terrified faces of the crew as they battled the raging sea. "Hold the line." Drake roared over the thunder. The crew scrambled, tying down sails and securing barrels as rain lashed their faces. Isabella clutched the compass that hung around her neck, a relic passed down through her family, said to always point toward destiny. But tonight, it spun wildly, refusing to settle. "The map's cursed," she muttered. "We should have never opened it." Suddenly, a massive wave slammed into the ship, throwing several men overboard. The screams were lost in the wind. Drake seized the helm, his muscles straining as he fought to keep the ship upright. "Captain, we can't fight this," shouted Black Jack. "We'll be torn apart." Drake's jaw tightened. "We don't give up," he said through gritted teeth. "Not when we're this close." Then, as quickly as it had begun, the storm ceased. The thunder faded, and the sea grew calm, eerily calm. The moon broke through the clouds, casting a pale light over the soaked deck. Drake looked around. "Report," he barked. "2 men gone," said Black Jack quietly, "and the main mast cracked. We'll need to make repairs at the next island." Drake's eyes darkened. "We pay the sea her price," he said solemnly, "but we keep going." Isabella, drenched and pale, approached him slowly. "You don't feel it, do you?" she said. "Something's wrong. Ever since we touched that map, it's like the world's been watching us." Drake didn't respond. Instead, he pulled the metal case from his coat. It felt warm, unnaturally so. He hesitated, then opened it. The map glowed faintly, like embers in a dying fire. Suddenly, the ink began to shift. Lines moved. Coasts changed shape. And a new mark appeared, a single black skull where none had been before. Everyone stared in horror. What does it mean? Miguel stammered. Isabella's voice was barely above a whisper. It means it knows we're coming. The next morning, the crew sailed under a blood-red sunrise. The wind had stilled, and an unsettling silence hung over the ocean. Even the gulls were gone. Black Jack stood at the bow, peering into the mist. "Captain, I don't like this. The sea's too quiet. It feels dead." Drake nodded slightly. "Stay sharp. We'll reach the Isle of Shadows by nightfall." Hours passed. The fog thickened. Shapes moved within it. Shadows that seemed to dance and flicker, though no one could tell if they were real. Then, out of the mist, a shape appeared. A dark mass rising from the sea. The island. Jagged cliffs loomed high, and the faint outline of a fortress could be seen through the fog. "There it is," Drake said. The map was right. But before they could celebrate, a voice called from the crow's nest. "Ship off the port bow." They turned, and there, cutting through the fog like a phantom, was another ship. Black sails, torn flags, no lights. Drake raised his spyglass, his stomach tightening. "No, it can't be. What is it?" Isabella asked. He lowered the glass slowly. "It's the Revenant," he said. "Blackbeard's ghost ship." The crew froze. Legends told the Revenant, a vessel doomed to roam the seas, its crew cursed for eternity to guard their treasure. No living man who crossed its path survived. And now, it was heading straight for them. The air turned frigid as the ghostly ship drew closer. The sea itself seemed to retreat from it. Figures stood on its deck, skeletal, glowing faintly, their hollow eyes fixed on the sea serpent. Drake turned to his crew. "Ready the cannons," he said grimly. "Captain, that's madness." Miguel cried. "You can't fight the dead." Drake's eyes burned with determination. "We came for the truth, and we'll face whatever stands in our way." As thunder rumbled once more and the two ships faced off under the blood-red sky, Isabella gripped her compass, whispering a prayer. For in that moment, every man aboard knew this was no ordinary treasure hunt. It was a battle between the living and the damned. And the map had chosen its players. The ocean was a mirror of fire and fury as the sea serpent and the ghostly revenant faced each other under a sky of crimson and storm. Lightning crackled across the horizon, illuminating the two ships locked in a deadly standoff. The wind howled, carrying with it whispers that chilled the blood, voices of the damned calling from the deep. Captain Drake stood firm at the helm, his long coat whipping in the wind. His eyes were fixed on the enemy's ship, the infamous Revenant, Blackbeard's cursed vessel, said to sail the seas long after her captain's death. She moved without sound, her tattered sails billowing though there was no wind. "Load the cannons." Drake roared. The crew sprang into action, hauling ropes and rolling the iron beasts into position. Black Jack's hand shook slightly as he rammed powder and shot into the barrels. "Captain," he muttered, "how do you fight something that's already dead?" Drake didn't answer immediately. He looked toward Isabella, who stood near the mast clutching her family compass. The device spun wildly again, refusing to point in any direction. "The dead or the living. It bleeds the same when steel meets will," Drake finally said. His voice was low but steady, the kind of calm that precedes chaos. The Revenant drifted closer, her hull dripping with black water that seemed to eat into the waves. Ghostly figures lined her deck, sailors with hollow eyes and bones visible through translucent skin. At the bow stood a tall shadow, a massive man with a smoking beard and eyes that glowed like embers. Blackbeard, even in death, his presence radiated command and terror. He raised a hand, and the ghostly crew responded in unison, moving like puppets bound by unseen strings. "By the gods!" Isabella whispered. "It's really him." The Revenant fired first. Flaming cannonballs tore through the night sky, screaming toward the sea serpent. The first one struck the starboard side with an explosion that sent wood and smoke flying. Men screamed as the deck shook violently. "Return fire," Drake shouted. Blackjack lit the fuses, and a thunderous roar erupted from the sea serpent's side. Cannonballs streaked across the churning waters, slamming into the Revenant hull. But to the crew's horror, the balls passed through as though hitting smoke. "They're ghosts!" Miguel shouted. "We can't hit them." Drake's jaw clenched. "Keep firing. Something's holding that ship to this world, and we'll find it." The Revenant drew closer, so close that Drake could see the skulls carved into her timbers. The sea around her seemed to boil, glowing faintly with unnatural light. Suddenly, hooks and ropes flew from the ghost ship, latching onto the sea serpent's rails. "They're boarding!" Blackjack yelled. Ghostly pirates leapt across the gap, swords drawn, their movements silent but deadly. The first one landed on deck before Miguel's blade flashed, slicing through it. The ghost screamed, a terrible sound that chilled every man's heart, and dissolved into mist. "See!" Drake shouted. "They can die. Hit them with iron and faith." The deck erupted into chaos. Steel clashed against spectral blades as the living fought the dead. Isabella drew her dagger, the silver catching the lightning above. She ducked under a ghost swing and stabbed it through the ribs. The blade burned bright, and the spirit disintegrated. Blackjack fought like a man possessed, his cutlass cutting to the fog, his face streaked with sweat and blood. "You picked the wrong ship to haunt," he bellowed, kicking one of the apparitions back into the sea. Amidst the chaos, Drake's eyes never left Blackbeard. The ghost captain stood unmoving on his deck, watching the slaughter with a grim satisfaction. Drake shouted across the storm, "Blackbeard, you've haunted these seas long enough. Time to rest." The ghostly pirate's eyes flared red. His voice, deep and hollow, rolled across the waves. "You seek my treasure, mortal, but gold bought with blood can only be kept by the damned." "I'll take my chances," Drake growled. Blackbeard raised his sword, a blade of black fire, and pointed it toward the sea serpent. "Then be buried with me." The Revenant's cannons fired again, and this time the shots were no ordinary fire. Dark energy ripped through the air, shattering wood and throwing men like rag dolls. The sea serpent groaned, her sails catching fire. "Captain," "She won't hold." Blackjack shouted over the roar. Drake turned to Isabella. "The map, it led us here for a reason. There's got to be a way to break the curse." Isabella's mind raced. "The symbol on the map, the serpent eating its tail, it means eternity. The curse is a cycle. Then how do we break it?" Drake demanded. She looked up, lightning flashing across her face. "We have to destroy the map." Drake froze. "Destroy the map? After everything we've lost to get it?" "It's the key holding him here," she yelled. "As long as the map exists, so does he." Another explosion ripped through the deck, sending shards flying. Miguel was thrown into the railing, screaming. Smoke filled the air. Drake hesitated, torn between greed and survival, between the legend and his people. Then, with grim resolve, he pulled the metal case from his coat. "Forgive me, old friend," he whispered to the parchment. "You brought us this far." He tossed it into the flames. The fire roared, brighter and hotter than before, turning from orange to blue. The air itself seemed to crackle with energy. The ghost pirates froze mid-strike, their bodies flickering. Blackbeard screamed, a sound that shook the heavens. His ship began to crumble, its timbers dissolving into black mist. "You think this ends it?" the ghost roared. "You can't kill a legend." Drake lifted his sword. "No," he said, "but I can end your curse." He charged, leaping from the deck onto the Revenant. The two captains clashed under the storm, steel against flame, life against death. Each strike sent shockwaves through the air. Drake fought with the fury of a man who had nothing left to lose, while Blackbeard swung with the might of eternity itself. Finally, with one final strike, Drake plunged his blade into the pirate's chest. A blinding flash erupted, and Blackbeard's body burst into light, his scream echoing as he vanished into the storm. The Revenant exploded into a wave of white mist that washed over the sea serpent. When it cleared, only one ship remained, battered, broken, but alive. Drake collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily. Isabella ran to him. "Captain, you did it." He nodded weakly, his clothes torn and scorched. "The curse, it's over." But as the waves calmed and the stars returned to the sky, something stirred in the water below, a faint glow, deep beneath the surface. The map was gone, but its magic wasn't. And in the dark depths of the Caribbean, a whisper echoed through the sea. "The treasure waits for no man." The sea lay eerily calm after the storm, as if exhausted by the battle it had just witnessed. The sea serpent, battered and charred, drifted through the still waters like a wounded beast. The crew worked in silence, their faces pale from fear and disbelief. The ghost ship Revenant was gone, vanished into mist, but the memory of its unholy glow lingered in their eyes. Captain Drake stood at the helm, his clothes torn and damp, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The morning sun rose weakly through a haze of gray mist. It should have been a moment of relief, but the captain's instincts told him the danger was far from over. Isabella approached him quietly, her hand clutching her compass. The device, once chaotic, now pointed firmly in a single direction. "Captain," she said softly, "the island is close." Drake turned to her, his eyes weary but determined. "The Isle of Shadows," he murmured. "After all this, it's still calling us." Blackjack overheard and spat on the deck. "Calling us to what, Captain? More ghosts? More curses? We nearly lost our souls out there." Drake didn't answer. His gaze drifted across the water. Ahead, a dark shape began to form within the mist, tall cliffs, jagged peaks, and dense jungle pressing against the shoreline. The island rose from the sea like a giant's tomb, wrapped in shadow even beneath the morning sun. The crew fell silent as they beheld it. "There she is," whispered Miguel. "The Isle of Shadows." A strange hum filled the air as they approached, a sound too low to be wind, too rhythmic to be waves. It was almost as if the island itself was breathing. "Drop anchor," Drake ordered. The chains rattled, and the anchor plunged into the depths with a heavy splash. The ship creaked and came to a halt just off the black sands of the island shore. No birds sang. No waves lapped. The silence was unnatural. "Arm yourselves," Drake said grimly. "We don't know what waits for us inland." Isabella tightened her grip on her compass. "The treasure," she said quietly. "The map may be gone, but the magic still points the way. It wants us to finish what we started." Blackjack frowned. "Aye, but who's really leading who?" The crew disembarked onto the beach. The sand was black as obsidian, and each step they took sank deeper than expected, as though the island resisted their presence. The air was thick and heavy, filled with the scent of salt, decay, and something older, something ancient. Towering trees loomed over them, their twisted roots resembling skeletal hands. Drake drew his sword and motioned for Isabella to lead the way. Her compass glowed faintly in the mist, pointing them deeper into the jungle. As they walked, strange whispers drifted through the trees. They couldn't tell if it was the wind or something unseen. Shadows moved between the branches, always just beyond sight. Miguel clutched his musket nervously. "Captain, maybe this treasure's not meant to be found." Drake gave a faint smirk. "Maybe that's why it's worth finding." The path grew darker. Vines hung like ropes from a canopy, and the air grew colder the deeper they went. Suddenly, Isabella stopped. "Wait," she said, kneeling beside a strange carving on a stone pillar. It was the serpent symbol again, the same one that had been on the cursed map. Only this time, its eyes were made of red gemstones that glowed faintly in the dim light. "It's a warning," Isabella murmured. "The serpent eating its own tail. Eternity, death, rebirth. Whoever built this didn't want outsiders." Drake examined the carving closely. "Then we're in the right place." As they moved forward, the ground began to change. What had been soil and roots gave way to stone, cracked and ancient, covered in moss. They were walking on ruins now. Massive stone arches jutted from the earth, remnants of an old fortress or temple swallowed by the jungle. The architecture was unlike anything they had ever seen, neither Spanish nor Mayan, but something older, lost to time. "This place," Isabella whispered, awe in her voice. "It's not just a pirate hideout. It's a tomb." A sudden gust of wind blew through the ruins, carrying with it a low, mournful wail. The torches flickered. Then, from the shadows, a figure appeared. He wore tattered armor and carried a rusted sword. His face was pale as bone, his eyes hollow and burning faintly blue. Behind him, more figures emerged. Skeletal warriors in decayed uniforms, some Spanish, some pirate, others in strange garb lost to history. "The island's guardians," Drake muttered. One of the undead stepped forward, speaking in a voice that echoed like 1,000 whispers. "Turn back, or join us forever." The crew froze. Miguel crossed himself. Drake stepped forward, sword drawn. "We came for the truth, and we're not leaving without it." The spirits raised their weapons, and the jungle exploded into chaos. Steel clashed with bone as the living fought the dead. Drake swung his cutlass, shattering a skeleton's ribs. Black Jack fired his pistol into another, sending it crumbling to dust. Isabella chanted something in an ancient tongue she had read from the ruins, her voice trembling but strong, and the spirits nearest her recoiled. "They're bound by the island," she shouted. "They can't leave. They're cursed to guard the treasure forever. Then we break the curse." Drake yelled back, parrying a sword strike. The battle raged through the ruins until finally Drake and Isabella reached a massive stone door carved with symbols. The serpent was there again, coiled around a skull with a crown. Isabella pressed the compass against the carving. It glowed brighter and brighter until the stone cracked and groaned. The door began to open, releasing a gust of hot air that smelled of gold and death. Inside, a vast chamber glimmered with treasure beyond imagination. Mountains of gold coins, jeweled goblets, ancient relics from every corner of the world. The crew stood frozen in awe. "By the stars," Black Jack whispered. "We found it." But Isabella's expression was grim. "This isn't a treasure hoard," she said quietly. "It's an offering." Drake frowned. "To who?" Before she could answer, the ground trembled. The gold began to shift, sliding toward the center of the chamber, where a massive golden sarcophagus lay. The lid began to move. A blinding light filled the room as it slid open, revealing a shadowy figure inside. A deep, ancient voice filled the air. "You have come seeking fortune, but you have awakened fate." Drake stepped back, sword ready, his eyes wide. "Who are you?" The voice rumbled like thunder. "I am first claimed to seize. The Serpent King, the one whose curse built this island." The figure began to rise, tall, draped in gold and bone. Its eyes burned with the same light as the jewels outside. Isabella's voice trembled. "Captain, we've opened something we can't close." Drake gripped his sword tightly, meeting the glowing gaze of the ancient being. "Then we'll end what we started." The Serpent King smiled, a terrible, knowing smile. "So be it, treasure hunter." The chamber shook violently as the walls began to crumble, and the sea serpent's crew found themselves facing not just an ancient curse, but the wrath of the one who created it. The golden chamber trembled like a living heart. The air was thick with dust and ancient power. Gold coins rolled across the floor, clinking softly as they fell into cracks that seemed to open and close like hungry mouths. The once silent treasure room now pulsed with an unholy energy that made the walls glow faintly red, as if the very stone bled. Captain Drake stood at the center of it all, sword in hand, his crew forming a loose circle around him. Isabella clutched her compass tightly to her chest, her eyes locked on the colossal golden sarcophagus that had just opened. From within, the Serpent King rose, slowly, regally, terrifyingly. He was tall, nearly twice the height of a man, draped in gold armor encrusted with rubies and emeralds that caught the flickering light. His face was both human and inhuman, flesh that seemed carved from obsidian, eyes that burned with the cold flame of eternity. His mouth curled into a faint smile that didn't reach those eyes. When he spoke, his voice rolled through the chamber like thunder under the sea. "You dare disturb my rest, mortals?" The crew froze. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Drake stepped forward, though every instinct screamed at him to flee. "We came for the truth," he said, his voice steady despite the fear twisting in his gut. "The map led us here. To you." The Serpent King tilted his head, studying him. "The map," he said slowly, his voice ancient and heavy. "A fragment of my power, stolen long ago by thieves who thought they could claim my legacy. Isabella's brow furrowed. So you created it? He turned his burning gaze toward her. Long before your nations claimed these seas, I ruled them. My empire stretched from horizon to horizon. Gold flowed like rivers. But greed destroyed it. My people betrayed me, and I cursed them and myself, to guard what they desired most. The room darkened, the light from the torches flickering violently. In the shadows, faint figures began to appear, ghostly outlines of soldiers, priests, and pirates, all bowing to the Serpent King, their faces twisted in eternal torment. "The curse," Isabella whispered. "The guardians outside, they were your people." The king nodded slowly. "Bound to me until the end of days. And now, you come, seeking what they once sought, my treasure." Drake's grip tightened on his sword. "We didn't come for gold. We came for freedom. To break your curse and end the nightmare that haunts these seas." For a moment, the Serpent King was silent. Then he laughed, a deep, echoing sound that made the walls tremble. "You think you can end what the gods themselves could not?" He raised his hand, and the treasure around him began to move, coins lifting into the air, forming spirals of golden dust. The sarcophagus behind him sealed itself shut as the entire chamber transformed into a storm of light and shadow. Blackjack shouted, "Captain, we need to get out of here." But Drake didn't move. His eyes were locked on the ancient being. "If it's a curse, it can be broken," he said. "Every curse has a source, and every king has a weakness." The Serpent King smiled, amused. "You have courage, pirate, but courage without understanding is suicide." With a flick of his wrist, the floor split open, revealing a chasm beneath them filled with swirling mist. From it rose shadowy serpents, their eyes glowing blue, their bodies made of smoke and flame. The crew stumbled back, slashed at the air as the creatures lunged. Miguel screamed as one wrapped around him, its spectral fangs sinking into his arm before Drake's sword cleaved through it. The serpent shattered into sparks. Drake turned to Isabella. "There has to be a way to weaken him." She flipped open her compass. The needle wasn't pointing north. It was spinning faster and faster, glowing brighter each second. "The compass isn't showing direction," she realized. "It's reacting to him. It's part of the same power." The Serpent King extended a hand toward her, and the compass was yanked from her grasp by an unseen force. It flew across the air into his palm. "Indeed," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "This trinket was forged from my blood. It has guided fools to their doom for centuries." He crushed it in his hand. The metal shattered like glass, releasing a burst of blue light that threw everyone backward. Drake hit the ground hard, but forced himself up, his body screaming in protest. "You call us thieves," he shouted, "but you've stolen every soul that ever dared to dream of freedom." The king turned his gaze upon him, his expression unreadable. "Freedom," he said softly. "There is no freedom, only the endless cycle of desire and ruin. You are no different from the rest." Drake spat blood and lifted his sword. "Then I'll die proving you wrong." The king's smile faded. "So be it." The battle began. Drake charged, his blade striking sparks against the king's golden armor. Each blow sent shock waves through the chamber. The Serpent King fought with one hand, his movements impossibly fast for his size. His staff crackled with energy, each swing tearing through stone and flame. The crew tried to help, firing pistols and swinging cutlasses, but their weapons shattered against invisible force. The king swept his arm, and a wave of energy threw them all aside like rag dolls. Only Isabella stood, eyes blazing with determination. She had noticed something. Every time the king drew upon his power, the gems in his armor pulsed. "The jewels!" she shouted. "They're feeding him. Hit them." Drake dodged a strike that split the floor and slashed upward, his blade cutting across the king's chest. One of the ruby stones cracked, spilling liquid gold that hissed as it hit the floor. The Serpent King roared, staggering back. "You dare defile my crown." Drake didn't hesitate. He pressed the attack, slashing again and again, each strike breaking another gem. The king fought back furiously, but for the first time, his blows seemed slower, weaker. Isabella seized a fallen torch and hurled it at the golden throne behind him. The flames erupted, licking the walls, turning the chamber into an inferno of light and heat. Drake drove his blade deep into the king's chest. The ancient being screamed, a sound that shook the very air. His golden armor shattered, revealing a dark core pulsing like a heart of molten fire. Drake pulled his blade free, eyes burning with determination. This ends now. He raised the sword high and plunged it into the heart. The explosion was blinding. Light filled the chamber, swallowing everything, gold, bones, shadows, and screams. The sound was deafening, 1,000 souls crying out as the curse unraveled. The floor collapsed and the walls crumbled. Drake felt himself falling, through light, through darkness, through history itself. He saw visions, pirates, kings, explorers, all those who had chased the same dream of power and paid the same price. And then silence. When the light faded, Drake opened his eyes to the soft sound of waves. He was lying on the black sands of the island's shore. The sun was rising, golden and warm. Isabella was beside him, bruised but alive. The ship Serpent floated offshore, miraculously intact. The king? Drake asked weakly. She shook her head. Gone. The curse, it's broken. He looked out to sea, where the mist had cleared for the first time since they arrived. The horizon stretched wide and blue, free. Black Jack limped toward them, grinning despite his wounds. Captain, he said, we may not have gold, but I reckon we found something better. Drake smiled faintly. Aye, he said, rising to his feet. We found our freedom. As they prepared to sail away, Isabella looked back one last time at the island. The ruins were sinking slowly beneath the waves, the golden light fading forever. But deep beneath the sea, where the sun could not reach, something stirred. A faint pulse, like a heartbeat, echoed from the depths. The Serpent King was gone, but not forgotten, and the sea, as always, kept its secrets. The morning sun shimmered across the Caribbean waters, glinting off the calm waves like a sea of liquid gold. For the first time since their perilous journey began, Captain Drake and his crew felt a strange peace. The island that had nearly claimed their lives was gone, swallowed by the ocean's depths, and with it, the curse of the Serpent King, or so they believed. The sea serpent creaked gently as it sailed through the open waters. The smell of salt and gunpowder still lingered, but the stench of death and decay that had haunted the cursed island was gone. The air was fresh, cleansing, almost new. Drake stood at the bow of the ship, staring into the horizon. His coat was torn, his beard unshaven, his eyes shadowed by exhaustion. Yet, beneath that rugged exterior, a spark of pride burned. Against all odds, they had survived. Behind him, Isabella approached quietly, her long brown hair whipping in the sea breeze. She held a worn leather notebook, the same one that had belonged to her father. Still staring into the distance? She asked with a faint smile. Drake didn't turn. A captain's habit, he said, always looking for what's next. She joined him at the rail, gazing out at the endless blue. You think the curse is truly broken? He hesitated. I'd like to believe so. But the sea has a way of keeping secrets. Isabella. What we saw down there, what we fought. He trailed off, gripping the railing. I'm not sure anything that ancient truly dies. Isabella looked down at the notebook, her fingers brushing the edge of a yellowed page. My father once wrote that treasures of the past don't just hold gold, they hold memories. And memories, she said softly, never die. Drake smiled faintly. Wise man, your father. A shout interrupted them. Captain, Black Jack called from the rigging. We got sails on the horizon. Drake's head snapped up. The calm moment vanished instantly. He raised a spyglass and scanned the horizon. Sure enough, dark shapes were cutting through the distant waves. 2 ships, maybe 3. Pirates? Isabella asked. Drake lowered the glass. No, worse. The Navy. A murmur spread across the deck. The British flag was visible now, fluttering in the wind. The Royal Navy, hunters of pirates, destroyers of freedom, was closing in fast. Prepare to change course. Drake barked. We'll lose them through the southern channel. Aye, Captain. The crew leapt into motion. Sails unfurled, ropes snapped taut, and the ship veered hard to starboard. The The sea serpent groaned as it sliced through the waves, racing toward the misty edge of a nearby reef. Isabella held onto the rail, steadying herself. They must have been tracking us. Drake nodded grimly. Word travels fast in these waters. Someone must have seen us near the island. The Navy's been hunting me for years. They won't pass up a chance to catch the infamous Captain Drake returning from a lost island with treasure. Even if we have no treasure? She asked. He smirked. They don't know that. Behind them, cannon fire thundered. Water exploded into towering columns around the ship. Return fire. Drake shouted. The crew manned the cannons, firing back. Smoke filled the air as cannonballs whistled overhead. The chase was fierce. The Navy ships were larger, faster, and armed with more firepower. But the Sea Serpent had something they didn't. Drake's cunning. Take us through the Devil's Channel, he ordered. Black Jack gaped. Captain, that's madness. The currents will tear us apart. Drake grinned. Only if you don't steer like a pirate. The crew exchanged nervous glances, but they obeyed. The Sea Serpent surged toward the narrow passage between jagged rocks. Waves crashed violently against the cliffs, spraying white foam high into the air. The Navy's ships hesitated. The channel was too dangerous for heavy vessels. Drake seized a moment. Now, full speed ahead. The ship shot into the narrow strait, scraping past rocks so close they could have touched them. Cannonballs exploded harmlessly against the cliffs behind them. When they finally burst out into open waters again, the Navy's ships were gone, unable to follow. Cheers erupted from the crew. Black Jack threw his hat in the air. "Ha! I told you, lads. No Navy can outwit Captain Drake." Drake smiled but said nothing. He was already thinking ahead. The encounter had rattled him. The world beyond the island had changed while they were gone, and every port, every governor, every ship now wanted their heads. As night fell, the Sea Serpent anchored near a small hidden cove an old smuggler's hideout Drake had used in his younger days. The moonlight shimmered across the calm waters, and the jungle beyond was alive with the sound of crickets and distant howls. Around a small campfire on the beach, the crew shared what little rum they had left. To survival, Miguel toasted, raising his cup. To freedom, Isabella added. Drake nodded, staring into the flames. To the ones we lost. They fell silent, remembering the faces of those who hadn't made it. Brave souls swallowed by the curse of the Serpent King. After a while, Isabella spoke. "What will you do now, Captain?" Drake stared into the fire. "Find a new path," he said slowly. "I've chased gold my whole life, and nearly lost everything because of it. Maybe it's time I start chasing something else." "Like what?" she asked, curious. He smiled faintly. "Peace. A place where no one knows the name Drake." She chuckled softly. "And what about the legend? The stories people will tell the pirate who fought a king beneath the sea?" "Let them tell them," he said. "Stories are safer than the truth." Later that night, while the crew slept, Isabella stood by the shore, looking out at the starlit horizon. She pulled out her father's notebook again and began to write. "We found the Serpent King, just as he dreamed. We faced death, greed, and the weight of history itself. But in the end, the real treasure wasn't gold or glory. It was survival and freedom." As she closed the book, she noticed something glimmering in the sand. A small, broken shard of the compass that the Serpent King had destroyed. It still pulsed faintly with blue light. Her heart skipped. She picked it up and felt a faint vibration in her palm, like a heartbeat. "Captain," she whispered, turning toward the ship. Drake appeared beside her, drawn by her tone. "What is it?" She showed him the shard. "It's still alive." He frowned. "I thought it was destroyed." "So did I," she said softly. "But look, it's pointing." The shard's faint light flickered, forming a line across her palm, pointing toward the southern horizon, where the sea met the stars. Drake's jaw tightened. "That direction, that's near Tortuga." She looked up at him. "Do you think it's another curse?" He stared out at the endless sea. Or another beginning. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of salt and destiny. The waves lapped gently at their feet, as if whispering secrets from the deep. "Would you really want it to be?" Drake closed his eyes, listening. He could almost hear it. The faint echo of the Serpent King's laughter rolling across the waves like thunder far away. "Maybe the sea's not done with us yet," he murmured. Isabella smiled faintly. "Would you really want to be?" Drake chuckled, turning back toward the ship. "No," he said, "not yet." As dawn approached, the sea serpent set sail once more, its sails catching the first golden rays of sunlight. The crew didn't know where the strange shard would lead them, to fortune, to ruin, or to something beyond imagination. But one thing was certain: the legend of the treasure hunters of the Caribbean was far from over, and as the ship vanished into the horizon, the sea shimmered, as if bowing to its most daring thieves. The sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the Caribbean skies in shades of molten gold and crimson. The sea serpent cut through the waves with a calm steadiness that belied the tension lingering in the air. After their harrowing escape from the Isle of Shadows and the defeat of the Serpent King, the crew had expected a return to normalcy, a chance to breathe, to recover, and perhaps even forget the horrors they had faced. But the sea, as always, had other plans. It started subtly at first. Small things, almost laughable if they weren't so unsettling. A fishnet ripped in half with no apparent cause. A compass spinning wildly, though it had been broken long ago. A shadow darting beneath the waves, just beyond the ship's keel. The crew tried to laugh it off, chalking up to nerves or fatigue, but the uneasy feeling lingered like a persistent whisper. Captain Drake stood at the bow, staring into the darkening waters. His mind replayed the final moments with the Serpent King, the golden light, the collapse of the ruins, and the shards of the broken compass Isabella had found. Something about that light had felt unfinished. "Captain!" Isabella's voice broke his reverie. She held the glowing shard in her hand, which pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. "It's acting strange again." Drake frowned, taking the shard from her. It was warm to the touch, humming softly. The Serpent King was gone, he said, almost convinced himself. But his power, maybe some of it stayed behind. Before Isabella could respond, a violent gust of wind swept over the deck, carrying with it a faint metallic smell. The waves erupted into a frenzy, larger and darker than anything they'd seen since the battle. "Brace yourselves," Drake shouted. From the depths of the water rose a shape, massive, twisting and dark. The sea itself seemed to convulse, forming the silhouette of a monstrous serpent, longer than any ship could measure. Its scales shimmered like black obsidian, and its eyes glowed a fiery blue, the same hue as the Serpent King's final pulse. Miguel screamed. "It's the Serpent King! No, it's bigger. Something else." The creature surged out of the water, its enormous jaws opening to reveal rows of sharp teeth that could shred a man in an instant. Its roar echoed across the waves, a deep, haunting sound that sent shivers down every spine. Drake drew his sword. "Everyone, hold your positions. We survived before, we'll survive again." But the crew knew instinctively this was different. The Serpent King had been defeated, but something older, darker, had awakened in his place. Something the king's curse had kept dormant beneath the island until now. The shard pulsed violently in Drake's hand, glowing brighter and hotter. Isabella realized its significance. "Captain, the shard is reacting to it. Whatever this is, it's tied to the king's power." The sea monster rose higher, then crashed down with a wave that nearly capsized the sea serpent. Wooden beams splintered, barrels rolled across the deck, and screams filled the air. Black Jack gritted his teeth, firing his pistols into the rising wave of water. "They've gone completely mad. This isn't the sea, it's alive." Drake slammed his sword into the deck, grounding himself. This is the legacy of the Isle of Shadows. The Serpent King's defeat wasn't the end. It was a beginning. Isabella clutched the shard, her voice trembling. "We thought destroying the map would end the curse, but maybe it only unleashed it." The crew scrambled to secure the ship, but the creature attacked with a fury unmatched by the ghost pirates. Its massive tail smashed against the hull, creating cracks that ran like lightning through the wood. Water poured onto the deck, and the sea serpent groaned under the strain. Drake's mind raced. They had survived curses, ghost ships, and ancient kings, but a living manifestation of the Serpent King's essence was beyond anything they could fight with swords or cannons alone. "Isabella!" Drake shouted over the roar. "There has to be a way to stop it." She studied the shard, her eyes narrowing. It's feeding on the king's residual power and on fear. The more terrified we are, the stronger it becomes. We need to weaken it mentally, spiritually. Drake glanced at his crew, all pale and exhausted, gripping their weapons for dear life. Then we face it together. No panic, no fear. Only action. He took a deep breath and shouted, "Steady! Hold the ship steady. Face it, not with swords, but with courage." Slowly, the shard began to emit a steady, calming pulse. Isabella held it aloft, her voice rising in a chant, an ancient incantation she had discovered among the ruins of the Isle of Shadows. The light from the shard spread across the deck, bathing the crew in a soft blue glow. The Serpent hesitated. Its glowing eyes flickered as if confused by the energy. Then it roared, a sound of rage and pain combined. Drake seized a moment. "We don't run," he shouted. "We face what the sea has sent us. Strike with heart, and it will falter." The crew, inspired by his courage, rallied. They swung swords, rammed the creature with poles, and fired what little gunpowder they had left. But the real weapon was a shard in Isabella's chant, the pulse of courage, bravery, and defiance that cut through the creature's dark energy. The Serpent writhed violently. Waves crashed over the ship as it tried to shake them off. Its glowing eyes dimmed, then brightened again, thrashing in desperation. Finally, with a deafening roar, it dove beneath the waves. The ocean erupted in a massive spout of water and light. When the foam settled, the creature was gone. Silence fell over the sea serpent. The crew stared at the waves, breathing heavily, hearts pounding. Drake leaned heavily on the railing, sweat and seawater dripping down his face. "Is it over?" Isabella held the shard, now dimming and cool. "For now," she said softly. "But whatever that was, it was only a fraction of the curse. The Serpent King's legacy runs deep in these waters. There could be more waiting or worse." Drake looked out toward the horizon, where the sun was disappearing beneath the waves. "Then we sail forward. Whatever comes next, we'll face it as one crew. No fear, no hesitation." Black Jack wiped his brow and muttered, "I thought we'd earned a bit of peace, but I reckon the sea doesn't care about what we think we deserve." Drake smiled faintly, the weight of years of battles etched into his face. "Peace is earned, Black Jack, and the sea only gives it to those bold enough to claim it." As the sea serpent sailed through the twilight, the water shimmered strangely. Faint traces of blue light danced along the waves, as if the Serpent King's power, though defeated, had not entirely vanished. Miguel shivered. "Captain, do you think it's watching us?" Drake tightened his grip on the railing, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I don't know, lad, but one thing's certain. The treasure of the Isle of Shadows isn't the end of our story. It's only the beginning." Isabella looked at him, eyes wide. "Then we'll need to be ready. Whatever comes next, the curse isn't done. It's only testing us." Drake nodded. "Aye, and we'll prove stronger." The crew gathered around the deck, battered but alive, their spirits rekindled. The curse had returned, a warning that the Caribbean was a sea of endless legends and dangers. But for the first time, they understood the rules of the game. Courage, unity, and cunning were the only weapons that could withstand the ancient power that lurked in the shadows. The night grew deeper, stars twinkling like watchful eyes above them. Below the waves, something moved. Faint ripples, glowing blue in the darkness, almost imperceptible but undeniably present. The curse had returned, and the adventure was far from over. The first light of dawn spilled across the Caribbean, painting the sea in shades of gold and violet. The sea serpent sailed steadily, its battered hull creaking with every wave, but its crew moved with purpose, battle-hardened, alert, and determined. The events of the Isle of Shadows and the return of the Serpent King's curse had changed them all. They were no longer simple treasure hunters. They were survivors of legends, walking the thin line between myth and reality. Captain Drake stood at the bow, staring at the horizon. The sea stretched endlessly before him, but for the first time, he sensed direction, purpose. The shard Isabella had discovered, the broken compass piece, pulsed faintly in her hand, pointing them toward a destination unknown. Isabella approached, notebook tucked under her arm. "The shard's readings are stronger now," she said. It's pulling us south. There's something beyond even the isle shadows. The final treasure, maybe? Drake's eyes narrowed. Final treasure, he repeated. He had chased countless maps, legends, and cursed fortunes, yet none had been as alive, as dangerous, as this. If this is truly the end, then we must be ready for anything. Behind them, Black Jack, Miguel, and the rest of the crew were checking supplies, repairing the sails, and keeping watch. Each man knew the sea had more surprises in store. They had survived ghosts, curses, and the wrath of the Serpent King, but there was a sense that the final trial would demand everything they had. As the day wore on, the water around them began to change. The calm blue of the open sea shifted to deep indigo, almost black, and a thick fog rolled in, cutting visibility to mere meters. The air grew heavy, the winds eerily still. "Stay sharp," Drake warned. "The final treasure won't be unguarded. The sea itself will test us." Hours passed, the ship slicing through the fog like a knife. Then a faint glow appeared ahead, soft, golden, almost like sunlight beneath the mist. The shard pulsed stronger, as if recognizing the presence of the treasure. "There!" Isabella pointed. "It's close." The crew exchanged glances, adrenaline surging through them. They had faced death, and yet the promise of discovery, of completing their journey, filled them with a renewed vigor. As the sea serpent drew nearer, the fog parted to reveal a small, hidden archipelago. Jagged rocks jutted from the sea like the spines of some colossal beast. Between the rocks lay a lagoon, shimmering with a golden light that seemed to rise from the ocean floor itself. Drake's heart pounded. The treasure, it's here, and it's unlike anything we've ever seen. The crew lowered small rowboats to navigate the narrow channels between the rocks. Every stroke of the oars echoed eerily, amplified by the cliffs surrounding them. The lagoon's golden light reflected off the water, illuminating strange symbols etched into surrounding stones. Serpents coiled around crowns, waves forming endless circles, eyes staring from every surface. "This is ancient," Isabella whispered. "Older than the Serpent King, even. The symbols, they speak of guardians, but also of enlightenment. This isn't just treasure, it's knowledge, power." Drake nodded slowly. "And danger. Stay close." They reached the center of the lagoon, where a massive stone pedestal rose from the water. Upon it lay a chest, unlike any Drake had ever seen. Crafted from black obsidian and inlaid with veins of gold, it pulsed faintly with a light that seemed to breathe. The shard in Isabella's hand glowed intensely, almost blindingly. She held up to the chest, and the two lights merged, forming a single radiant beam. "This is it," she said, voice trembling. "The final treasure." Drake stepped forward cautiously, eyes scanning for traps. He had learned the hard way that nothing so heavily guarded came without peril. His sword was drawn, ready for whatever guardian or curse might appear. Then, a ripple of water erupted around the pedestal. The lagoon began to churn violently, waves rising higher than the cliffs themselves. From the depths emerged a figure, a colossal serpent, larger than any creature they had seen before. Its scales shimmered like liquid gold, eyes glowing with the same fiery light as the Serpent King's essence. "The guardian," Drake whispered. "It's alive." The creature coiled around the pedestal, blocking access to the chest. Its head towered over them, jaws opening to reveal rows of sharp teeth. Yet its eyes were intelligent, almost knowing, as though it were testing their worthiness. Isabella took a step forward, holding the shard aloft. "This isn't about fighting it," she realized. "It's about proving ourselves worthy. The shard, it wants to judge us." Drake nodded. "Then we do as it asks. Stand firm. Show courage, wisdom, and unity." The serpent lowered its head slightly, as if acknowledging the truth in his words. It hissed, a sound that echoed across the lagoon like a warning and a challenge. Drake and his crew approached slowly, weapons lowered. Every step was tense, every heartbeat loud in the heavy air. The shard pulsed faster, responding to their collective courage. When they reached the pedestal, Drake lifted his sword and placed a hand on the chest. The moment he touched it, the chest's light surged, enveloping the entire lagoon. The serpent coiled once more, then vanished into the depths, leaving the chest unguarded. Isabella gasped. It accepted us. Drake opened the chest carefully. Inside was not just gold or jewels, but a collection of ancient scrolls, strange artifacts, and a crystal orb that seemed to contain the entire night sky within it. The air hummed with power, and a sense of understanding filled them, as though the treasure itself contained centuries of knowledge, secrets of the sea, and wisdom of the ancients. This is beyond wealth, Drake said softly. It's the culmination of everything we've chased. Knowledge, power, and a chance to change the future. The crew stared in awe, understanding that their journey had been more than a hunt for gold. They had survived curses, battled legends, and faced the very essence of the sea itself. And now, they held a treasure that could alter the course of history. Isabella placed the shard next to the crystal orb. The two pulsed in unison, a perfect harmony of light and energy. "The curse is gone," she whispered. "We've completed it. The Serpent King's legacy, finally at rest." Drake looked at his crew, each one battered but alive, eyes wide with wonder and pride. "We started as treasure hunters," he said, "but we become something more, guardians of legacy, witnesses to the impossible, survivors of the greatest adventure the Caribbean has ever known." Black Jack grinned, holding a small golden coin he had retrieved from the chest. "Aye, Captain, and we'll tell the tales of this journey for the rest of our lives, or die trying." Drake smiled faintly, looking out over the lagoon, the sun breaking fully over the horizon. "Then let's sail home, not as men who chase gold, but as men who faced legends and survived." As the sea serpent departed the lagoon, the chest's glow faded, but the power it contained remained, safely sealed by those brave enough to claim it. The Caribbean was quiet, serene once more, yet the whispers of the Serpent King and the guardians of the deep lingered faintly in the waves, as though acknowledging that their story had been told, for now. The crew looked at the horizon, knowing that the sea held infinite secrets, and that their journey had changed them forever. But one truth remained clear: courage, loyalty, and unity had triumphed over greed, fear, and ancient curses. And as the ship sailed into the golden light of a new day, the legend of the treasure hunters of the Caribbean was complete. For now. But the sea would always hold more secrets, waiting for those daring enough to seek them. And that, my friends, was the treasure hunters of the Caribbean, the real pirates of the Golden Age. If you enjoyed this thrilling tale of gold and glory, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Golden Ancient Tales for more stories that bring the past alive. Until next time, keep your compass true and your heart braver than the sea.